Are we restarting? Okay. One of the recurring theme we work with is the idea of the hearth. The Potato Eaters by Van Gogh is one such representation, capturing one of the most primitive and fundamental human acts of coming together around a meal table. A wildly futuristic and provocative version of the same idea can be studied in the works of Italian radical architecture practice, Superstudio. Their most prominent vision was that of the universal grid, a generic plane that absorbs everyone and everything. They presented a continuous, ever repeating venue for unifying ideas, things, and places. Their work was a critique of human society and its underlying inequalities, disparity, and injustice. The universal grid was their rebellious alternative for a world based on ideas of inclusivity and equity. The culture of eating communally is quite known in our way of life. From religious festivals to celebratory events, weddings to pilgrimages, the act of sharing a meal with a stranger is prevalent and perpetually practiced by the Keralite. Increasingly, as the world divides over political differences on what we wear, what we speak, and what we eat, we pondered about what the new eating space for today's generation should be. How can we interpret cafe culture to represent values of togetherness and comfort? This is where the idea for the community table came from. For the architectural manifestation of it, we turned to Superstudio's concepts of universality. The table became the heart of the design, and the rest of the space evolved from this. For the spatial planning, we had the challenge of dealing with an irregularly shaped shell. We tried to find a new geometry within it by turning to the supremacist paintings by the Russian artist Casimir Malevich. Malevich claimed that there is something more pure, more universal, and truer than the images of the natural world. In his paintings, one is confronted with the universality rather than the specifics. The shapes and colors are stripped of hierarchy and symbolism, unburdening the composition from objective meaning. We introduced a composition in the space given to us which could absorb an assortment of elements, objects, and artifacts. The first attempt was to identify a grid geometry within the regular plan, which was imagined as a square on the floor and reflected as a grid false ceiling. The table was then placed within this geometry, extending out of the glass wall into the exterior. We also introduced plenty of greenery, amidst which the table is nestled and serves as an element of surprise. All other surfaces were planned to provide a flexible canvas. This became a collaborative and unifying process that fostered design freedom for both the architects and the clients. The community table re-emerges in every project in its bright plethora of colors, becoming synonymous with the brand's identity. Simultaneously, it is also an adaptable object that can change according to new spaces, needs, and requirements. With its length and diagonal dynamic arrangement on the plan, juxtaposed against carefully placed elements, it becomes a highly emphasized form. To further emphasize it, we worked on another recurring theme of the monolith by replicating the grid geometry on other surfaces for a seamless, free-flowing result. The design of the table can be endlessly repeated and extended, an ode to the human capacity to come together. The entire design is muted and limited in its choice of color, texture, and detail. We believe that the only ornamentation needed is that of the served food and the kaleidoscope of garments worn by the people at the table. An ever changing scenography of people. There was audio to it. The utilitarian material finishes of a commercial kitchen, such as steel and glass, are used to create a blank canvas that distinguishes the servant space from the served space. The warmth of the hanging garden on the outside and the semicircular plane of garden on the inside tones down the muted palette of steel. Steel and mirror are used in complementary ways, the flying lines of light taking cues from the shapes on the ground plane further helps in articulating and defining spaces within space. The steel also creates a playful illusion by reflecting and mirroring the ongoing activity, while also maintaining the idea of a monolith, a blank canvas. There are moments of intersection of shapes, patterns, texture on the floor plane. Reflections, transparencies, illusions are almost immaterial. And there are again moments of intersections of shapes, patterns, textures on the ceiling plane as well. The community table re-emerges in every project in its bright plethora of colors, becoming synonymous with the brand's identity. Simultaneously, it is also an adaptable object that can change according to new spaces, needs, and requirement. The image on the right is our latest attempt to continue the same idea in their next cafe for the same client. For ages, the fireplace that provides food, warmth, and safety has always brought people together. In today's divisive world, we hope it continues to do so on our continuous table. Thank you.
Thank you for a very interesting project. Again, it's more dialogic rather than what comes through in this project, and I think you stated it also, that in a context of a very divisive world, that there is the possibility of an element like a table
Yeah, yeah,
to kind of meander
yeah,
and break
yeah,
boundaries,
yeah.
And the other interesting thing was one or two of them were from another project. I would
No,
assume.
just the one image on the
One
last,
image.
last
Yeah,
slide.
was
Yeah.
another project.
Just to show that it continues.
Sure. So, it also gave a idea that this continuous table may be running through 10 projects, the same
Yeah,
table.
yeah. Hopefully.
And yeah, it's just as an idea. So in this, because you're talking of various forms, various nuances, could you, if it's possible, it's more intangible, elaborate on when the formation of this table changes, do you see it influencing a gesture of how we inhabit? Or does it matter? Does it not matter? Like if there's a straight table, something happens. If the table bends and does something,
Yeah.
something happens.
Yeah.
And I find in this project the relationship, though it was in interior category, I find that the relationship with the street also gets established through a interiority.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I thought that is a very interesting thing, that generally an interior project would link to interior.
Yeah.
Here it's stretching it and
Yeah.
linking to an exterior but this idea of forms of tables, are there any intuitions that have come to, maybe later going to a site, seeing how people are inhabiting
Yeah,
it, or
yeah,
what's
yeah.
happening? If you could, the experiential
It's
side.
quite interesting. The table is kind of an experimental. It's an experimental type for us. We always look at the table, how people are inhabiting, which seats are being occupied first, for example, how a couple use it. They don't sit in opposite sides, they sit side by side. So they take up 4 seats together. So there are certain practical problems. Also, the waiters, they needed an entire new system to, because it is kind of incremental. Sometimes there is a whole group of people sitting together. Sometimes there's another two. So it was a learning curve, but it was interesting because the clients also were really young, and they had this, the question of identity. So they supported us, and I hope we'll find out more interesting ways to put the table. So
I think it's a very fascinating narrative that you've built up leading to that table. And one doesn't find many interior projects attempting that. Inevitably, an interior project picks up its starting ground through this whole idea of palette and mood board and things like that, which come directly to the answer. Whereas I see very clearly a preoccupation to, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a simple table. You could have easily come to it directly and still built this. But the very fact that you built it up as a narrative, which led to this, I think gives it strength to continue. And its ability to also maybe modify itself a little bit to adjust to the conditions that may come up. I think it's very, very well done. And for a young company, and not to be too much in your face, not to over clutter the spaces. I think those have been very well managed in this project. So congratulations to you.
Thank you.
Just building on my colleagues, I think the project brings together, you've reflected on universal values of human existence.
Absolutely.
Which is very beautiful coming together in an interior project.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you, ma'am.